The secret GOP plan to buy, steal, and rig the election is becoming more clear. We've been telling you about radical ways they're suppressing the vote, and we're now learning about an explosion of money. Politico reports the billionaire conservative Koch brothers plan to spend $200 million on the 2012 election. Combine that with Karl Rove's $240 billion, and that's nearly $500 million going against Democrats. There's also a nationwide effort to suppress votes by changing state election laws that may make it harder for some 5 million voters to cast their ballots in 2012. Voters like Dorothy Cooper, the 96-year-old Tennessee woman we introduced you to last week, who was denied a voter ID because she didn't have her marriage license. Republicans have passed similar laws in 13 states this year, including Wisconsin. A new report by the League of Women Voters say that law caused long lines and confusion during the state's recall elections in August. With plans to spend hundreds of millions of dollars buying and blocking votes, it's more important than ever we fight back. Joining me now is Melanie Sloan, Executive Director of Citizens for Responsibility and Ethics in Washington, and Joe Madison, Sirius XM radio host. Thank both of you for joining me tonight.
Thanks.
Joe, I was in Ohio. I've been around different states that are dealing with these voter ID laws. This, according to Brennan Report, may cost us 5 million voters alone if these voter ID laws and stopping early voting and other voting law changes actually go into effect in these states that they're being proposed in.
I was in Wisconsin, Madison, Wisconsin, speaking just this weekend, and their changes for voter ID, Reverend Al Sharpton, will actually eliminate 77% of the African-American males in Milwaukee alone.
Wow.
77%. Now, the two of us, as you know, have done voter registration probably like no one else in the United States. I with the NAACP. And I remember we could register people on cheese lines, right, if you remember that. But look what's happened in Florida. In Florida, the League of Women Voters will not vote. Here's the point. If there is first of all, if there's massive voter fraud, it's usually caught on the local level. The second thing I hope will happen in terms of people getting ready to get folks to vote, this because they can't wait for the legal system to turn these things around. But I do hope that the Justice Department can somehow use the 1965 Voting Rights Act, particularly in states that fall under the jurisdiction of the Voting Rights Act.
Because they're supposed to get pre-clearance if it affects any of those districts. And we're going to be talking about that Saturday at the rally. Melanie, when Joe says that if there is voter fraud found, it's usually local, well, when we look at the data, the Bush Justice Department probed voter fraud from 2002 to 2007, 5 years. They only came up with 0.00003% in voter fraud. They only convicted 86 people. So this is a solution looking for a problem. This is not a problem looking for a solution. When you combine that with what you've researched on the money that is going in from the Koch brothers and Karl Rove, these forces that are going to be campaigning on these referendums and the changing of these state laws are going to have a lot of money to spend.
That's right. First, let's be clear. There is no voter fraud problem in America. This is a problem that people have just made up out of whole cloth to try and suppress the vote in a way we haven't seen suppression since the 60s and before. This is just a new way to stop people from voting. And in addition to that, we have this massive amount of money that will be pouring into our elections, and it's all going to be secret money. We're simply not going to know which corporations are sponsoring which politician. And it'd be nice if politicians were required to, like NASCAR drivers and other athletes, wear the insignia on their sleeves of which corporation was endorsing them. But we don't know. So we don't know if these politicians' positions are bought and paid for.
Now, Joe, you said that in Wisconsin, in Milwaukee alone, 77% of black men will lose their vote. Look at this graph of how the breakdown of eligible voters with no photo ID, how it breaks down according to the Brenner Center for Justice. 15% of poor, 18% of elderly, 20% of voters between 18 and 29, youth voters, 25% of African Americans. This is really undermining the Voting Rights Act of 65. We're talking about dedicating a monument to Martin Luther King while we're undermining everything King fought and died for.
Absolutely. Dick Gregory gave an excellent show the other day, and one of the things he said that in the 1960s, the intimidation was physical, as you know. It was physical. Meg Evers lost his life. 3 young men in Philadelphia, Mississippi lost their life. Today, the game is mental. It's a very clever way of suppressing the vote. And look at those statistics. Look at those categories. They just happen to also be Barack Obama's base. And that's what this is about. It won't suppress everyone, but just enough, particularly in battleground states, to make sure that if it's a close election, which it probably will be, that they can peel off another a certain amount of votes. You know, Melanie said it. I mean, she said it right. The reality is that this is voter suppression. Yep. This is just instead of Jim Crow of the 60s, this is James Crow Esquire, their sophisticated cousin.
And James Crow Esquire Jr. has a big bank account because, Melanie, as you've exposed, that in 2006, independent groups spent $69 million. Last year, with 61 congressional seats flipping, they spent $305 million, Melanie.
Right, and that money is going to be dwarfed. We're going to see this election well over $1 billion spent, and we're not talking by the candidates themselves. We're talking by outside groups sponsored by people like Karl Rove with his American Crossroads, the Koch brothers. We are seeing, in addition, the addition of a new phenomenon this year, which is the candidate-specific super PACs, where Mitt Romney and Michelle Bachmann and Rick Perry all have PACs of their very own that are dedicated to raising millions of dollars in money for their campaign. So we're going to see endless amounts of money pouring in, and we're just not going to know who's doing it.
And these are outside of the campaign. People should not confuse it. We're not talking about the money for our campaign. This is independent money. I've got to go. Thank both of you, Melanie Sloan and Joe Madison. Thank both of you for joining me tonight.